Analyzing data with logical and lookup functions. There are three functions that we're going to discuss in this video: the if function, the Vlookup, and the Hlookup. To begin, we'll start with the if function, which allows us to create a logical test and then display a value if that's true or display a value if that's false. A logical test can be any kind of true or false question, which could be like a greater than, equal to, or less than situation. So let's have a look at our employee data. We can see we have some yearly budget information for our Austin and Atlanta office locations. If we wanted to check if these numbers were exceeded by our summary of sales reps in Atlanta or the total summary of sales reps numbers that we computed earlier, we could use a logical if check. So right here next to our summary of sales reps in Atlanta salary total, I'm going to create a logical if statement check. We can see here in our yearly budget information for Atlanta that we have the sales rep salary total of $80,000. So we're going to check, does the salary total for sales reps in Atlanta exceed, or is it greater than, our yearly budget salary total for sales reps in Atlanta? If that's true, we know we're over budget, so I'm going to put over budget. Comma, if that's false, I'm going to put within budget. We can see that that if statement is processed immediately, and we can see that within budget is being displayed because we're only spending $78,300 while our budget was $80,000. We can do more complex calculations inside of the if statement to get a more comprehensive logical question. For example, we have the summary of sales reps across both locations salary total here, $206,300. We can use a logical if statement to determine if the total $206,300 is greater than the combined sum of what should be happening in Austin and Atlanta. So a sum of J2 and J5. If that's true, then we know we are over budget. And if that's false, we know we are within budget. We can see that we're over budget because doing some quick arithmetic, 80,000 plus 75,000 is 155,000, of which we are exceeding that because our current salary total is 206,300. We can use logical if statements anytime that we want to make a logical check against data or calculations in our spreadsheets. So next we're going to look at the Vlookup or vertical lookup function. And here we have a typical student grade report with some students, some grades, their total out of the total number of points possible, and a percentage value for the class. Now, using the vertical lookup function allows us to take information that is being vertically displayed in a table, such as this grade table down here, and apply that logically to assign a value. So in this case, we're going to use the vertical lookup function to evaluate the percentage that the student has obtained, compare it to the information in the grade table below, and display the appropriate grade value. Now, the way this table is set up, if a student has obtained less than 60%, and in this case we just put 0, they have an F. 60% to 70% would be a D, 70 to 80 would be a C, 80 to 90 would be a B, and 90 or higher would be an A. So to write this function, right, we would use the Vlookup, and Vlookup takes three different pieces of information. The first one we want is the lookup value. This is the value that we're wanting to compare or logically evaluate. So this would be our percentage. The next piece of information is the table array, or the whole table that is stored that we want to look up inside. The third piece of information is the column index. Now, the column index allows us to specify which column inside of that table do we want to show. So I have one column, that's the percentages. I have the second column, that's the letter grades. Since it is the letter grade column that I want to display, I would choose the number 2. So let's hit enter, and we can see that an 85% is a B. Now the first thing that you don't want to do is pull down on this Vlookup function once you have it, because obviously it's not going to work. That's because our lookup table never changes, and we need to make sure that we're using the correct cell references inside of our function by creating the absolute references to the cells that are the range that contains our grade table, or whatever vertical lookup table you're using. So by putting those $ around the column numbers or the column information, we can specify that we don't want that information to change as we pull this function tab down. So now I can pull it down and I can see that each grade is evaluated, right? An 80 is a B, a 71 is a C, 75 is a C, a 55 is an F. The HLOOKUP function works pretty much the same way as the vertical lookup, but for horizontal tables. So instead of working with columns, we're working with rows. So using this same letter grade function for a horizontally designed table, we would use the HLOOKUP, and then your values are going to be pretty much the same. You have the value that you want to evaluate, right, your lookup value. We select the table, and then we indicate which row in this table that it is that we want to display. And we have one row which is the percentages, and the second row which is the letters, and that's what we want to display, so we select 2. And then when we hit enter, we can see that that's being evaluated. Now the same problem that we had on the other function, where our lookup table never changes, we need to make sure that these are absolute cell references before we pull this down. And then we can pull that down and see we should be getting the exact same results that we got on the vertical table, but in a horizontal format.